I want you to get the book of Esther open. It's found in the Old Testament before Job. May take you a little while to find it. Always does me. But it's right before Job. Now, I'm going to attempt to do something in the next few minutes, and that is to tell you the story of Esther. This is a book that one day I want to go through and slow down and literally verse by verse, because there's so many great truths. But on this Mother's Day, you got to see the big picture of Esther. And you got to see the story, okay? So I thought the best way to tell the story, I won't be able to go into details, and no telling what I'll say. Last night I had a few things in the wrong place, but we're going to get it right. I want you to visualize, okay? So I thought to help us visualize, we need some people to help me. All right, now the king involved in this is a Persian king. His name is Ahasuerus. He's also Xerxes. He is the Xerxes of the movie 300. In fact, that movie is about an event that happens during the book of Esther. So it's a connection for those of you that have seen the movie 300 with the war between the Greeks and the Persians. I thought the best person to help us see that is a man who has the name of a Persian king, Cyrus the Great. So welcome Cyrus the Great to the platform. Now this is going to be our king, all right? Now, I'm going to need some more help. I'm going to need a couple of guys. Kyle, can you come up and help me? And Kyle is going to play a part. And they're not going to do anything to just stand here and help us to get this story in mind. And then, Melody, can you come up and help me? Lori, would you mind playing Esther today? Not on your violin, but just stand here. You got it? And then I need Haman. Dan Harrington? Dan, could you come up and help me? We were just sitting over thinking how much you looked like Haman and reminded us of Haman, so come on up, would you? You do that for us. Now, Cyrus, go ahead and take your throne. Let me set this up for you, okay? You got your Bible's open. You're thinking Esther. This happens in the 5th century BC, before Christ. You remember the Jerusalem and the southern kingdom of Israel fell to a nation called Babylon. And the Babylonians had a way of destroying their enemies by deporting you. They led people out of Jerusalem, took them to live in Babylon. Okay? That happened at 600 years before Christ, down to about 587. It was a horrible time. It's called the Babylonian captivity, lasted about 70 years. Then another nation overcomes Babylon, the Persians. And they have a king called Cyrus the Great, who comes to the throne and who is gracious. In fact, the Old Testament actually calls him the Anointed One. And the reason is because he let the Jews go home. He said, hey, you guys that don't live here, I mean, you're not from here. If you want to go back to Jerusalem, go back. And in 539, 538, some believe, he said, go back. And Zerubbabel went back to rebuild the temple. Nehemiah went back to rebuild the walls. Ezra went back to restore the law. But some didn't go back. They continued to live there in Persia. Now, one of those was a woman named Esther, who lived under the care of her cousin named Mordecai. She was an orphan. Her mom and dad most likely were killed during the Babylonian captivity. And so her cousin Mordecai took her in and began to watch her and care for her while they were living in Persia. The capital then was Susa, S-U-S-A, and that's where everything happened. So the king, this guy, was fond of parties. And the opening chapter of the book of Esther is a party. Okay, it's basically a party. A 180-day party. Okay, 180 days, he's having a party. At the end of that party, he has another 7-day party where he brings the wine in and there's drunkenness everywhere. Now, while he is doing that, Melody, come here just a second. Melody is the queen at the time. Her name is Vashti. Vashti is his queen, his wife. While he's having a party with his boys, she goes over here. Hey, man, you need to get on that. Hey, man, get over on the other side there, man. She goes over here, and she has a banquet for the ladies for the wives of the men who are over here? The Bible says she was a beautiful woman. So much so, when he gets drunk and everybody around him is drunk, he calls for her. He wants her to come, and in the Hebrew, it could go one of two ways. Either he wanted her to just parade in front of the boys, or it could be he wanted her to disrobe and show her beauty off. She was a trophy wife in every sense. I mean, that's what she was. But you see, Vashti was a woman of honor. And I think it's probably the latter. I think he wanted her to disrobe. I think he wanted her to really shamefully present herself and her beauty to all these guys. And she said, no way, King. I'm not about to do that. Well, in Persia, you don't say no to the king. So as soon as she said no to the king, he did two things. Number one, he said, bye-bye, it's been nice knowing you. Great job. As she goes, he got rid of her. The second thing, he sent out a decree that if a woman disobeyed her husband, she was liable, she was guilty, and she would be punished. It angered him. Okay, that's how this book starts. Chapter 2. After these things, what things? After he went to war, he went and fought the Greeks. He went and fought the Spartans. He got whipped. And we have a Spartan here this morning who is very thrilled I'm telling this story. It's his moment in time. Go ahead and wave to the crowd and brag on your Spartan blood there. So he got whipped. He comes back wounded. He comes back really, I'm not wounded necessarily physically. I'm just talking about he's been beaten up. He's ready for a wife. He's like, okay, I got to find another wife. So what does he do? He tells his assistants, I want you to gather up the most beautiful women in Persia. And I want them to be virgins. And I want you to gather them all together. I want you to make a harem of them. And I want you to take care of them. I want you to spend 1 year cosmetically getting them ready, 1 year doing a spa treatment on them, 1 year doing all kinds of treatments. And after 1 year, I want you to let them pick anything they want to wear. In other words, send them to Neiman Marcus, let them get anything they want. You send them to Neiman Marcus, they get anything they want. They've had 1 year of cosmetics, 1 year of oil treatments, 1 year of all this elaborate stuff, and then they go in and spend one night with the king, and after he goes through all these women, he'll pick the one. Well, guess what? There was a young lady by the name of Esther. Her cousin Mordecai had been caring for her. She's an orphan. She's a Jew. He doesn't know that. Nobody knows that. Mordecai is a Jew and a righteous man. Mordecai tells her, do not tell the king, because she was chosen to be one of the harem girls. She was chosen. So, Mordecai, it appears from the book of Esther, you spend most of your time sitting at the king's gate. So just go sit right over there, okay? That's where you see him every time. He's at the king's gate. So Mordecai's sitting there, but he's watching her. He's keeping his eye on her because she, after all, he's adopted her. He's raising her. Now, we don't know how old Esther was, but she wasn't old. Okay, she's a young lady. Now, 1 year they take care of her. They treat her with all the finest, and they say, go to Neiman Marcus, get you something. But you know what the Bible says? Esther said no. I will take whatever you would like to give me. In other words, she didn't seize the moment and go, oh, here we go. It's shop till you drop. No. She didn't do that. She just said, I will go as I am. I will go with whatever you'd like me to go. She went into the king. Of all the women that went into him, guess which one he fell in love with? A Jew named Esther. God gave her favor with a Persian king. But there's a reason. So now, Esther, walk over here. Stand right by him. She is now the queen of Persia. She is his wife. Okay, so everything's copacetic. It's all good, right? Then Mordecai overhears Danny and one of the other pastors talking about a plot to overthrow the king. Okay? Seriously. In the Bible, in the Hebrew, the word is Danny. Anyway, he's going to overthrow, just kidding, overthrow the king. So Mordecai, watching out for Esther, gets a message to Esther. You got to tell the king. There's 2 of his boys that are going to take him out. So guess what? She tells the king The king immediately dispenses with the two boys, and that's done. Now, you would think he would honor Mordecai. You would think he'd go, man, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. Doesn't do anything. Not yet. Instead, he makes second in command a man by the name of Haman. Haman. Here's Haman. Come stand right here by the king. He's second in command. Now, you know who this guy is? This guy is from a people called the Amalekites. You remember them in the Old Testament in Samuel, 1 Samuel. Remember that chapter 15 when Saul was told to kill everybody and don't take any of the cattle and don't take any of the gold or silver? That was the Amalekites. The king then was Agag. He was the king of the Amalekites. This guy, that's Agag's kin to him. He's from the lineage of Agag, the king of the Amalekites. They don't like Jews. They hate Jews. Why? Because the Jews destroyed them. Almost. Saul disobeyed, but almost. So now he's second in command. Man, he's feeling good about it, you know. Here he is, an Amalekite. He's second in command all of Persia. So he's walking by one day. Everybody is falling down, honoring him, worshiping him. This guy, no. He encounters him, and Mordecai says, I'm not bowing down to you. I bow to one. I have a feeling Mordecai knew who he was, knew he was an Amalekite, knew all that story. But besides that, Mordecai worshiped one God, and that's Yahweh. He said, I'm not bowing to you. Drove this guy nuts. Drove him nuts. So he's thinking, how can I get back at him? Walk back over to the king. He's got a plan. He said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the king about this. I'm going to go to the king and tell him everything. And I'm going to get rid of these Jews because he knows Mordecai's a Jew. So he goes to the king. He said, King, there's a people among us that don't do like us. They don't worship the God we worship. They don't do the things we do. Their culture's different. And I think they're going to be a problem. So with your decree, I would like to take them out. The king says, absolutely. Gives his signet ring. Go ahead and take off your watch no, I'm just kidding. He gives his signet ring to this guy. And Haman goes, yes. So Haman is now trying to figure, when am I going to do it? When am I going to kill all these Jews? And he casts lots. Roll the dice just to pick a day. You know what the lots are called in Hebrew? P-U-R. Remember that. It comes into play later. He cast the lots. It landed on a day. So he's got a plan. It's all good. And he's bragging about this plan. And every time this guy won't bow, he just looks at him and goes, I'm getting you, dude. I'm getting you. And then all of a sudden, he tells Esther, Esther, we got a problem. We're going to be destroyed. And I believe God has placed you in this position for such a time as this. You got to go to the king. But Esther knew it was against the law to do it. She can't just waltz into the king. But she said, I'll do it. But you tell all the Jews to pray for me for 3 days. And you fast. And you ask God to go before me. Now, I want you to read that moment when Mordecai is sending messages to Esther. This is your moment, Esther. This is why you were born. This is God's placing you here for a reason. It's chapter 4. Chapter 4, Esther. In this chapter 4, beginning verse 13, here's the message from Mordecai. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the Jews. For if you keep silent, Esther, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether or not you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And then Esther sent a reply to Mordecai. Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa. Hold a fast on my behalf. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night and day. And I and the young women will fast as you do. And then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. One of the most powerful phrases in the Bible. If I perish, I perish. So what does she do? She prays. All the Jews in Persia pray. Then comes the day. She walks into the king and she requests something of him. You know what he said? Esther, I'll give you anything up to half my kingdom. She had the favor of this Persian king. And she said, well, really what I would like is I'd like a banquet with you and Haman. He said, that's easy. I can arrange that. That's good. And so everything's set for a banquet. Now, in her mind, she was going to have one night a banquet and the next night have another banquet. On that night, she's going to tell the whole story. But the first banquet happened. Haman is invited. They have a wonderful meal together. There's wonderful dining in the king's palace. All is good. Haman leaves the banquet. He is feeling great. Once again, he's got to walk by this guy. This guy does not leave the king's gate. Walks by him. He looks down at him, and I'm sure he's angered again. And you know what he does? He goes home, and he starts building gallows, a place to hang someone. He builds them 75 feet tall because they're getting them ready for this guy. So Haman's got the plan in place, and he's thinking, you know, before I go to the banquet tomorrow night, I'm going to go back into the king, and I'm just going to ask him if I can go ahead and do the deal because I'm tired of this. I want to get rid of the Jews. I want to get rid of this guy. So early the next morning, Haman comes in. What Haman doesn't know is that that night after the banquet, the king woke up early in the morning, early, in the middle of the night. Couldn't sleep. Just happened to wake up. Just happened not to be able to sleep. Called the guys who record all of his wonderful deeds. He says, hey, read me some of the deeds that have been done in my kingdom. All of a sudden, they start reading about a guy named Mordecai. How he spared the king, and he told him about a plot to kill him from an evil guy named Danny. Told him the whole story. And when the king heard it, he goes, what did I do to honor that man? Nothing. He said, that man must be honored. That man must be honored. About that time, there's a knock at the chamber of the king. Who is it? It's Haman. Haman comes in, and the king stops him and says, hey, Haman, what would you do for somebody that has done the most honorable, noble thing? How would you honor them? What's the greatest thing a king could do for somebody that is so loved and so honorable? Haman is thinking, well, this feels pretty good. He's thinking it's him. And he goes, well, what I'd do is I'd take that robe off and give it to this guy. And I'd take that crown off and give it to the guy. And I'd put him on your horse, and I think you ride him through downtown. And then the king said, that's what I'll do. Would you go do that for Mordecai? Isn't God awesome? It is great. Would you go do that for Mordecai? Haman is like, you got to be kidding me. Mordecai, who won't bow to me, he does it. He has to do it. Meanwhile, that evening, the banquet begins. Here comes Haman. He's already worn out from riding this guy around on the horse all day. He comes into the palace. They're having a lovely meal, and then Esther opens her mouth. King, whatever you'd like, honey, I'll give you half of my kingdom. What would you like? Well, King, there's somebody that's going to destroy my people, and it's going to destroy me. And they're going to do it to annihilate all of us. Who are my people? It's the first time she ever admitted to him she was a Jew. The king looked at her and said, who in their right mind would ever do anything to you or your people? And don't you know this was a wonderful moment? When they're sitting across the table, don't you know he was sweating? He is sweating. She looks up at him and says, that is the man. He's a wicked man. All of a sudden, the king is enraged. Haman, my number 2 guy, is going to destroy my queen and her people. He gets up. He gets all upset. He said, give me some time. He goes out into the garden just to get his mind together. Haman, come get on your knees right here. Haman comes over. He gets on his knees in front of Esther, and he's begging her for his life. And then in walks the king, and he misinterprets what's happening. He thinks he's assaulting her. And so the king looked at him and said, away with you. What shall I do with you? And one of the servants in the palace said, hey, I know where there's some gallows that have been built. And the king said, well, hang him on those gallows. So he gets hung on the gallows he built for his enemy. And Esther reigns as the queen of Persia. He reigns as the king. And guess who got to be number 2 in charge? Mordecai, come on down. Isn't that awesome? So there is the story of Esther. Give the Lord praise. Isn't that an awesome story? And the Jews were saved. You guys can go. Great job. So, you know that decree he sent out? The Bible says because they were following the law of the Medes and Persians. That, you've heard that? I mean, I used to use that. Like, man, is this the law of the Medes and Persians? It was. Couldn't be revoked. So he could not take the decree back that the Jews were going to be killed on that day. So here's what he did. He made another one. He sent a decree out that said every Jew could kill anyone who tried to mess with him. That's right. And guess which day they did it on? The day they threw the lots. The day Haman said, I'm going to kill all the Jews. The Jews killed 500 Persians that day. The next day they killed 300. By the time it was over, there were somewhere between 15,000 and 75,000 that were killed who tried to kill the Jews. Now, why do Jews still celebrate a feast called Purim? Adonai. They did it March 15th and 16th this year. You know why? To remember how God sovereignly delivered the nation of Israel, Jews, in that day from an evil king. Now, guys, when you hear this, I mean, when you think about God's sovereignty, let me just draw 2 points for you. And moms, here's where it connects with you. There are 2 of these incredible points that come from this. One, God's in control. He is in control. You can't read the book of Esther without seeing God in control. And you know what's interesting? The book of Esther never mentions God. There's not one time in the book where his name is used. But he's on every page. He's in every verse. He was behind everything. You see, God is the one who honored Esther. And what I want to say to you is, God is in control. He is the one that places you where you are. He made her beautiful. Am I right? He made her beautiful. He not only made her beautiful, but he gave her favor with Mordecai, so Mordecai adopts her. He gave her favor with the king of Persia. And everything in this book is about God's favor and blessing, ordering the steps of a Jewish girl who is an orphan named Esther. And he gave her one of the greatest privileges of all, and that is to be the queen of the land in Persia. Moms, you know how you got to be a mom? Now, I'm not talking about the physical part. That's not where I'm going. You know how you got to be a mom? God allowed it. You are blessed today to be a mother. And there are women today, as we've already prayed for, that would give anything in the world to be where you are and to have a child. You are blessed. Mom, never take for granted that God has blessed you with life. You're a mom. Whether it was by birth or by adoption, you're a mom. That's an honor. God gave you that position. He gave you that privilege. And so when you read the book of Esther, you realize that we are given things, we are placed in places because God wants to use us in that place for moments like this. God cannot be stopped by evil. When I talk about the sovereignty of God, I mean God cannot be stopped by evil. Evil was on every page on this book. Haman, everything he was trying to do, everything he was, the scheme of Haman, God didn't have a problem with that. He defeated it. And there are some moms in this room today that say, but you don't understand my circumstances. You don't know what I'm going through. No, I don't, but I can tell you this. All the bad this world can do, our God is bigger. You can be a godly mom. You can rise above all the evil that has been in your life. There are single moms here today that say, but Pastor, this is not the way it's supposed to be. No, it's not the way it's supposed to be, but it's the way it is. God is really good with the way things are and making them the way they should be. Evil cannot stop our God. You say, but my kids, I've got a child that's in rebellion. Don't give up. Evil cannot stop our God. You're listening to a rebellious child. You're listening to a runaway. You're listening to a rebellious child. Don't you quit. If you learn anything from the book of Esther, it's that God cannot be stopped. So Esther was patient. Esther was faithful. Mordecai was faithful. They didn't know what they were going to do, but they knew somehow God was going to take care. And guess what? He did. So let me just encourage you, Mom. of all the reasons you can't do it, for all the things that are coming against you, for all the issues you face, for financial issues, relationship issues, a dad that's not around, a father that doesn't care, a father that speaks evil of the kids. I mean, whatever it is, I'm here to tell you today, our God is a sovereign God, and He's bigger, and He can use you to make a difference in the life of your kids. I believe that. It's what His Word teaches. Second thing, human responsibility. You can't read the book of Esther without walking away going, she had a decision to make. She did. She had a decision. You got a decision. What are you going to do with the privilege that's been given to you? And that's why we read those verses a minute ago. I mean, the moment was hers. Esther, this is your moment. And I love what Mordecai said. He said, Esther, don't think for a minute you're going to be spared. Moms, you can't opt out of this one. You got to decide. How am I going to be a mom? How am I going to do it? You got to decide. You say, well, I can just do it in the flesh, or I'll do it any way I want, or I'll do it selfishly, or whatever you want. That's your choice. But just remember, your decision will affect you. There's some of you in the room that say, I can't do it. Why? Because you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what's happened. Okay, remind me, who was Esther? A Jewish orphan living in a foreign land. God used her. He can use you. Because, see, God can use anybody who's willing. God's never been about the smartest, fastest, prettiest. He's been about those whose heart are given to Him. And God can use you. Don't you discount who you are. You know, Esther could have played the victim card. She could have played the victim card. She could have given God excuses. And believe me, she had many. There were many reasons she could have said, I'm not going into that pagan king. I'm not about to do that. Of all the reasons she could have given, there was one that she gave. And it was, I'm going because of my God. If I perish, I perish. So moms, there's every reason in the world for you not to be a godly mom, to not bless your children, to not serve the Lord as a mom. But there's one overwhelming reason to serve Him, and that is God. Let Him fight for you. Put your trust in Him. Did you hear the song just a minute ago? You trust Him, and He fights for you. You surrender. You just say, God, you know who I am, and you know where I'm deficient. You know where I'm inadequate. You know where I'm weak. And God said, yes, because it's in your weakness that I'm made strong. That's what Paul said. So you're in a great place today, Mom, if you feel inadequate. If you feel like it's bigger than you and you feel like you're not doing a good job, you're in a great place for God to do an amazing work through you. And the last thing about human responsibility, when we make the decision to do it for God, it always matters. You realize Esther saved a nation. She got to the moment of saying, if I perish, I perish. But I got to do something, and guess what? She saved her nation. Look at the legacy of Esther. We're reading about her today. We're reading her story. We acted her story out up here. There's a feast every year that is celebrated among the Jews to remember and commemorate what Esther did. Did she make a difference? Yes, she did. And some of you have been a different person because of the mom who blessed your life. I'm telling you, Mom, when you surrender and say, if I perish, I perish, God, I'm doing it for you, you make a difference. You may not be able to see it. And especially in the moment, it may be hard. But you make a difference. Mom, who knows? But what you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Been given the honor to be a mom or a grandmother or a great-grandmother. You're never out of it. You have this moment. God brought us here today. He brought you here just like He did Esther. And so now is your moment to say, God, if I perish, I perish. I don't care what the world says. I'm going to be a godly mom. I'm going to pour my life and I'm going to pour you into my children. I don't care what others do, and I don't care what it costs me. If I perish, I perish. I will serve the Lord as a mom. I will give thanks for the privilege and the honor of being a mom. And this morning, I want you to do just that. When we stand in a moment, I want you to feel freedom to just come down. Now, if the family wants to come join you, that's fine. But moms, I want to invite you in an Esther moment. I want you to just say, God, here it is. If I perish, I perish. I will live the rest of my life for you. I will pour my life into my children, and I will bless you by blessing them. Father, thank you for the story of Esther. I know one day we'll walk the streets with her. And one day we'll get to walk up to her and say, thank you. Thank you. And God, I just believe there will be so many who will do the same for a godly mom who touched generations after her. They'll just say, thank you. So today, I pray that moms in this room will know that you are for them. And if you are for them, who can be against them? Nothing can stop you. So God, today, we come to that moment with Esther. If we perish, we perish. We will serve the Lord.